What just happened in Iran had nothing to do with Iran. While the entire world was watching bombers flying over Tehran, something much bigger was happening right under our noses. And the scariest part is they almost managed to hide it from all of us. We are talking about the first major battle of a war that most people do not even know is happening. A war for total control of global information. And what you are about to discover will completely change the way you see everything happening in the world right now. In late March, General Dan Kin, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stood at the Pentagon and made an announcement that seemed routine to most reporters in the room. He said that for the first time in the current campaign, B-52 bombers were flying continental missions over Iran. The media reported it as a military achievement. Destruction of Iranian air defenses had finally reached a point where these massive bombers could operate freely. But here's what nobody asked. Why now? Why announce this publicly? And most importantly, why reveal your strategic capabilities to the entire world unless you want everyone looking at something while something else is happening? The timing of this announcement is what should make everyone stop and think. Because at the exact same moment these B-52s were flying over Iran, the Starlink satellite network was quietly expanding its coverage in conflict zones around the world. The official story talked about GBU-31 bunker buster munitions weighing 2,000 pounds each. They talked about increased bombing capacity against underground facilities. But what they did not mention were the next-generation satellite communication systems being tested in real combat conditions. The prerequisite for this success, according to official sources, was the destruction of Iranian air defense networks during the first 30 days of Operation Epic Fury. But the real prerequisite was something nobody is talking about. The establishment of uninterruptible communication infrastructure that cannot be jammed, cannot be intercepted, and cannot be shut down by any nation on Earth. This is where it gets interesting. Days before General Kin made his announcement, the BBC reported on B-52 bombers being stationed at RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom. They showed footage of these massive aircraft taking off fully loaded with weapons. Reporters described the preparation, the deployment, the firepower. But what they did not show you was the simultaneous installation of Starlink equipment at military bases across the region. What they did not tell you was that while everyone was counting bombs, engineers were setting up satellite ground stations. The official term for what happened next is dynamic target selection. Sounds impressive, right? The military explained it as the ability to assign new targets to aircraft while they are already in flight. Planes can locate and attack objectives on their own. Revolutionary warfare, they said. But here is the technical truth that changes everything. Dynamic target selection requires real-time communication that cannot be disrupted. It requires satellite links that work even when every traditional communication system is being jammed. It requires exactly the kind of infrastructure that Starlink provides. What we witnessed over Iran was not just an air superiority demonstration. It was a live combat test of military Starlink infrastructure, and it worked perfectly. Now let me show you how they are selling this to the public versus what actually happened. In the initial phase of operations, they told us about long-range missiles, about standoff attacks where planes never got close to danger. They talked about stealth fighters like the F-35 and F-22 creating safe corridors. The B-52s would attack and pull back before Iran could respond. Limited penetration, minimal risk. That was the story. But the current phase shows something completely different. These bombers are flying directly over continental Iranian territory. They are penetrating deep into the country's interior. And the official explanation is that they achieved air supremacy. But the real significance is not air supremacy. It is information supremacy. While these planes were flying their missions, they were simultaneously mapping zones for future Starlink ground stations. Every flight path, every target, every successful strike was proving that satellite communication now works in the most hostile electronic warfare environment on the planet. And that should terrify anyone who understands what this means for the future. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something important. This video will likely be shadow banned within 48 hours. The combination of topics we are discussing, Iran conflict plus Starlink plus deep state coordination, triggers automatic suppression protocols on this platform. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition based on what happens to every video that connects these dots. The YouTube algorithm does not do this by accident. It is following protocols designed to limit the spread of certain information combinations. So I am asking you right now, hit that like button. Share this video before it gets buried, because once the suppression kicks in, the only way this information spreads is through direct sharing. Subscribe to this channel, because the next episodes will reveal the connections to China that make this look small by comparison. They do not want you connecting these dots, but once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Let us talk about Isfahan. The media gave you a very specific story about this city. They told you about underground nuclear facilities that had been attacked before. They mentioned Operation Midnight Hammer from last summer, where B-2 Spirit stealth bombers dropped 30,000-pound penetrator weapons. Some facilities survived, they said. The narrative focused on uranium enrichment, nuclear weapons capability, the danger of Iranian atomic ambitions. And yes, Isfahan does have nuclear facilities. But that is not why it became the center of the most intense bombing campaign of this entire operation. The real function of Isfahan has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. This city is a strategic communications hub for the entire Middle East. It sits at a crossroads of data routes connecting 3 continents. And more importantly, Iran had developed significant capability to interfere with satellite signals from this location. The true risk was not a nuclear bomb. The true risk was Iranian control over regional data routes and their ability to jam satellite communications. The objective that nobody is declaring publicly was to neutralize Iran's capacity to interfere with satellite signals. Every bombing run over Isfahan had a dual purpose. Yes, they were hitting military targets, but they were also destroying Iran's ability to threaten the Starlink network. When you look at the other targets beyond Isfahan, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Tehran was hit. Karaj and its multiple industrial zones were struck. The official story called them military nodes, weapons depots, missile production facilities. But when you map these locations and cross-reference them with known communications infrastructure, something else emerges. Every single location had capability for satellite signal interference. The mountain areas around Isfahan that exploded in secondary blasts were not just ammunition dumps. They were hiding uplink and downlink stations designed to track and potentially disable satellites in low Earth orbit. This is the infrastructure that had to be eliminated before Starlink could operate freely in the region. The industrial plants they bombed were not just making steel and petrochemicals. They were producing parabolic antennas and radar components. The nuclear facilities everyone focuses on were also housing redundant power generators for communications networks. When you understand what was really being destroyed, the entire operation makes perfect sense. This was not a conventional military conflict. This was infrastructure clearing for global communications dominance. Now here is where the official narrative tries to distract you with the perfect cover story. They started pushing stories about Iranian uranium stockpiles. Almost 1,000 pounds of material enriched to 60%, just one step away from weapons grade. The media ran terrifying headlines about nuclear capability and dirty bombs. And conveniently, rumors started spreading about a ground operation. Special forces would land in Isfahan, penetrate the underground bunker, extract the uranium, and get out fast. It sounded plausible. It sounded urgent. It gave everyone something to focus on while the real operation continued. But think about the timing. These uranium stories intensified exactly when Starlink satellites were being repositioned over the Middle East. The media obsessed over extraction teams and nuclear material, while engineers on the ground were installing satellite infrastructure. This is textbook misdirection. Give the public a dramatic story they can understand and debate while the actual strategic objective proceeds quietly in parallel. The uranium narrative served its purpose perfectly. Then alternative media sources started offering a different theory that actually got closer to the truth. They said the real plan was not extraction but burial. The bombing campaign was designed to collapse the tunnel access points to the uranium storage. Bunker buster bombs would seal the entrances, making the material inaccessible for a year or more. This would neutralize the threat without risking special forces. And this theory is partially correct, but it is still missing the bigger picture. Yes, they were collapsing tunnels, but not just uranium storage tunnels. They were burying Iran's electronic warfare infrastructure. The bunker busters everyone could see were hitting explosive targets and creating spectacular fireballs for the cameras. But the bunker busters nobody talks about were exploding deep underground with no visible flash. These weapons were collapsing Iran's satellite tracking facilities, their signal jamming equipment, their communications control centers. And the beautiful part of this strategy is that it leaves everything intact but inaccessible. The uranium is still there under hundreds of feet of solid rock. And so are Iran's anti-satellite systems. Buried, preserved, but completely useless. Iran is now blind and deaf to Starlink operations for the critical deployment period. And they accomplished this while everyone was arguing about nuclear material. Of course, Iran had to respond, at least for appearances. On March 31st, they launched missiles at Israel. The Times of India reported most were intercepted or landed in open areas. No casualties. A day later, Al Jazeera reported a different version. One ballistic missile got through, 16 people injured. The stories do not even match, which should tell you something. This was theater, coordinated performance to justify the next phase of operations. Iran's public posture was defiant. We will not back down, they declared, but the geopolitical reality behind closed doors was very different, because at the same time these missiles were flying, Iran was in secret negotiations about Starlink access. Reports of ceasefire discussions started leaking. But ceasefire over what exactly? The public thinks it is about conventional warfare. The reality is Iran is negotiating the terms of their connectivity to the new global communications infrastructure. They are not fighting to win anymore. They are fighting for a seat at the table when the dust settles. Now, let me take you into the technical details that prove everything I have been telling you. In the first week of operations, Israeli Defense Forces reported that 80% of Iranian air defense systems had been destroyed. Operations Epic Fury and Roaring Lion combined to achieve this. The media called it a good start but insufficient for total air supremacy. And they were right if you think this was only about air defenses. But by March 10th, General Kin made another statement that nobody properly analyzed. He said the majority of high-end surface-to-air missiles were now irrelevant. Fighters could fly with relative impunity. Think about what this really means. The progression was not just from contested airspace to safe airspace. It was from satellite-threatened environment to satellite-safe environment, because the same systems that threaten aircraft also threaten satellites in low Earth orbit. When fighters can fly with impunity, it means Starlink can operate with impunity. The systems that really mattered were not the ones shooting at planes. They were the ones capable of tracking and potentially disabling satellites. Iran's Bavar 373 system, domestically produced, had detection range of almost 200 miles. The official specs said it was designed for aircraft, but that detection range and altitude capability meant it could track satellites in low Earth orbit. The Russian-made S-300 PMU-2 systems Iran possessed had similar dual capability, officially anti-aircraft, but with modifications anti-satellite. These were the systems that had to be completely eliminated, not just degraded, not just suppressed. Completely destroyed. And that is exactly what happened. The United States now flies B-52 bombers over Iran with confidence because they know there are no remaining systems that can threaten their satellites. There might be isolated pockets of resistance. Some mobile units might have survived. Shoulder-fired missiles still exist. But the network is gone. The integrated air defense system that could coordinate tracking and interference is destroyed. And more importantly, fighter aircraft with advanced sensors can detect any remaining threats and either destroy them or guide bombers around them. The proof of this complete dominance is visible in the relentless bombing of Isfahan. You do not conduct operations like that unless you are absolutely certain there are no real air defenses remaining. But it gets even better. Last December, Business Insider reported on a radar modernization program for the B-52 fleet. The new systems provide better resistance to electronic warfare. They remove one more layer of potential Iranian defense. And here is the thing nobody mentions. These upgraded radars also allow direct interface with the Starlink satellite constellation. The first modified B-52 flew in late December. The timing is perfect. By the time operations over Iran intensified, these bombers were not just weapons platforms anymore. They were mobile nodes in the Starlink network. Each B-52 flying over hostile territory is also a communications relay, an electronic warfare platform, and a signals intelligence collector. The 70,000-pound payload capacity that everyone thinks is just for bombs also carries satellite communications equipment, signal jammers, and orbital tracking systems. The versatility that the Air Force brags about is not just about different types of bombs. It is about the ability to reconfigure each aircraft for whatever mission the satellite network requires. This is why Iran never knew what they were facing. Early in the campaign, the B-52s used long-range standoff munitions. Over Isfahan, they switched to bunker busters. Tomorrow, they might deploy something completely different. But the constant throughout all of this is the satellite communication link that cannot be broken. That is the real weapon. The bombs are just the visible effect. The invisible effect is the establishment of communication infrastructure that no nation can shut down. And this is just the beginning. The blueprint developed over Iran will be replicated anywhere a nation has anti-satellite capability. China is watching this. Russia is watching this. North Korea is watching this. They all know what just happened. The United States and its allies just demonstrated that they can eliminate an entire nation's ability to threaten satellite networks while the world focuses on conventional military operations. The Starlink War is not coming. It is already here. Isfahan was the proof of concept. The next targets are already being mapped. And the most terrifying part is how few people understand what they are witnessing. This is not about regional conflicts or nuclear weapons or military superiority in traditional terms. This is about permanent, unchallengeable control of global information infrastructure. Whoever controls the satellites controls everything. Communications, navigation, financial systems, internet access, military coordination, everything. And what just happened in Iran was the first major battle to secure that control. This operation proved the system works. It proved that existing anti-satellite capabilities can be eliminated. It proved that the public can be kept focused on conventional narratives while the real war happens in parallel. The deep state is not a conspiracy theory. It is observable coordination between government agencies, military command, and corporate interests working toward a shared strategic objective. And that objective is total information dominance through satellite control. You just watched it happen in real time. The bombing of Iran was not the end of anything. It was the opening move. Share this video right now because the next phase is already beginning and they are counting on you not connecting these dots. Subscribe because the China connection makes this look like a practice run. The war for control of human communication infrastructure is not just beginning, we are already several moves deep into it. And if you are just now realizing this war exists, you need to catch up fast because what comes next will make Isfahan look like a warning shot.